على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى غاصبي حقوقهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب الغرباء، يا مظلوم كربلاء. السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته. السلام على من الإجابة تحت قبته. السلام على ساكن كربلاء. فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا وكنا معكم سادتي، يا سادتي، فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال رسول الله وهو أشرف الأنبياء صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. إن الحسين مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة، صدق النبي وآمنا به. زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى محمد وعجل. أحبائي, you find that as we get closer and closer to the dhuhur of the Imam, the trials and the tribulations that the Shi'as of Ali Muhammad face become more and more staunch. And from the difficulties, from the trials, from the challenges that we face are the challenges that are aqa'idi, shubuhat and doubts that the Shia Ummah is attacked with when it comes to our Aqidah. Doubts and shubahat that are directed towards the events of Imam al-Hussein. Doubts and shubahat that are planted in the hearts of the mu'mineen or targeting the Shia Ummah to create doubts in the azamat of Imam al-Hussein, in the azamah of the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. Doubts that are strategically planted when it comes to bringing down the importance of the azadari of Imam al-Hussein. And if you see the environment in which we live, you find that all these shubuhat and all these challenges are directed towards the institution of Imam al-Hussein, and the end result is that the goal over here is to weaken this irtibat between the people and the Imam al-Hussein. And therefore, the member of Imam al-Hussein is a member that is supposed to be used to strengthen the aqidah of the people and not weaken the aqidah of the people. And similarly, when we live at a time where the aqidah and this institution of Imam al-Hussein is under threat, not only from the outsiders and the Wahhabis and the Nasibis, many times the doubts and the shubuhat against the institution of Imam al-Hussein is raised from people from within the school of thought. The enemy within, or the jahalat from within the madhab, is far much more dangerous than the jahalat that comes from outside of the madhab. And therefore it becomes important for us on these blessed nights of Muharram and Shahr Safar, the nights of Imam al-Hussein, that we are able to academically address some of these shubuhat that are being directed towards the madrasa of Imam al-Hussein, and that we should be in a position to academically reply back, not only to show the weakness of the shubuhat, but in the process to be able to strengthen our own aqidah, and in order to strengthen our connection also with Imam al-Hussein. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is on one hand. On the other hand, tonight's Majlis Ahibai is going to be a slightly more academic of a Majlis than what we traditionally hold within. And the reason for this being is that inshallah we're going to counter one of the shubuhat that are directed towards the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. And this is a shubha that is brought from certain people within the madhab. So our goal is to be able to academically provide a rebuttal and affirm our belief in the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. And number two, it is important that it is done in an academic manner, because in this day and age, it is also important for us to be able to show to ourselves before to others that when a person is a matami, a person is also an academic. A person can be a matami and can have ilm at the same time. Person who is a matami is also a person who has ilm, and is also a person who recites salat and does his namaz. Sometimes I find many times the thing is that you find that there are many arguments and separations that happen in the community, and they say, well, these matamis, they don't pray namaz. But actually, you could turn the argument around. You could say, why these namazis don't do matam? The idea is that matam strengthens salat, and salat also strengthens the matam. There shouldn't be this sort of fitna within the community to try and distinguish between the mu'mins. In reality, it is the wilayah of Amirul Mu'mineen that decides whether your salat is accepted or not. Having said this, the majlis for tonight is in regards to a shubha that is placed in regards to the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. And the hadith that is targeted, or the hadith that has been brought under scrutiny and attacked, is a hadith which is narrated in the text Kamilu Ziyarat. I will read out the hadith for you, and inshallah we embark on this journey of ilm, journey nuraniya, And you will see how a shubha is actually countered, and how belief and the institution and the azama in the institution of the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein is brought forward for us. Hadith al-Sharif that we want to discuss for tonight is mentioned or narrated in the book Kamilu Ziyarat. Hadith al-Sharif is narrated by Safwan al-Jammal. Safwan al-Jammal narrates on authority of Imam Abi Abdullah, يعني Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa sallam. Hadith al-Sharif says, and Safwan al-Jammal قال لي أبو عبد الله عليه السلام لما أتى الحيرة هل لك في قبر الحسين قلت وتزوره جعلت فداك. Safwan al-Jammal is a companion of Imam al-Sadiq. Hadith says, Safwan is saying, when I was with Imam al-Sadiq and we both came to Hira, yani Safwan al-Jammal together with Imam al-Sadiq, they came to Karbala. Imam al-Sadiq asks Safwan, هل لك في قبر الحسين? Imam al-Sadiq is asking Safwan al-Jammal, do you perform the ziyarah of the qabr of Imam al-Hussein? So the Imam is asking him a question. What does Safwan say? Safwan said to him, وَتَزُورُهُ جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ. Safwan now asks the Imam, do you perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? Are you supposed to perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? Look at the question of Safwan. What is the answer of Imam al-Sadiq? Qal. This is the answer of Imam al-Sadiq. What is the question from Safwan? Do you perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein or no? The reply is what? وَكَيْفَ لَا أَزُورُهُ. Imam al-Sadiq says, how can I not visit Imam al-Hussein? والله يزوره في كل ليلة جمعة. عجيب. Imam Safwan is asking Imam al-Sadiq, should you visit Imam al-Hussein? Do you visit Imam al-Hussein? Imam al-Sadiq is saying to him, how can I not visit Imam al-Hussein when Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? يحبط معه or يحبط مع الملائكة إليه والأنبياء والأوصياء. Together with Allah, the malaika, the anbiya and the awsiya perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. طيب. Over here, shubha. This is the point of where the doubt is placed by certain people who claim to be Shia. They say this hadith that is narrated in Kamilu Ziyarat is a hadith that is fabricated. This is a hadith, aslan, that has kufr. Number one, it has kufr. Number two, the hadith is fabricated. Because of the kufr, they claim it is fabricated. They say, Baba, why? They come and they say, how can you say that Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a jism. Allah is not defined by makan or zaman. So how can you come and say that Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? And the hadith over here says very clearly, Allah yazur. Imam al-Sadiq says, كيف لا أزوره والله يزوره في كل ليلة جمعة. Every Thursday night, Allah, together with the Anbiya and the Malaika, perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. So how do we now reply back to this rebuttal? Because the ishkal over here is that how can Allah perform ziyarah of somebody? Allah is not a jism like us. Or this hadith, a person may understand that Allah has a body. So they say, based on this, this is a hadith, number one. They say this is hadith that is fabricated. Number two, because they didn't understand this hadith, they come forward and they say, look, hadith like these are proof that intum Shi'as, you have hadith that are exaggerated in your literature when it comes to the fada'il of Ahlul Bayt. See, you have to understand the psychology of the shaitan, the psychology of somebody who creates shak in the madrasa of Imam al-Hussein. They find one door and they attack everything else in the house. So they come and they say, look, this one hadith is dalil that your literature, when it comes to the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein, there is exaggeration and there is fabrication. This one hadith is also proof that the maqtal that you recite for Imam al-Hussein, there is exaggeration and there is fabrication. And this one hadith is dalil that what you people do in your azadari is also fabricated and is also exaggerated. They use one hadith to open the door and substantiate multiple claims. How do we reply back to this? In addition to all of this, they come and they discredit the book Kamilu Ziyarat in its entirety. Because when you read the book Kamilu Ziyarat, this is translated in English and it's available in PDF as well. We'll speak a little bit about Kamilu Ziyarat right now. Kamilu Ziyarat, kitab ha'il. It has secrets of the madrasa of Imam al-Hussein. You find some of the words that are used by the Ahlul Bayt. For example, just the comparison of ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein with Hajj. So they discredit the book in its entirety. How do we go about replying back to ishkals and to objections such as these that are brought sometimes from the mimbar and sometimes by people who are within our own madhab? For the purpose of tonight, we are not concerned about the outsiders. We are concerned about strengthening the home and strengthening the numbers within us. Because we are supposed to be people of ma'rifah, people of ilm. And our daydana, our manhaj is that we counter ishkal and shubuhat with ilm. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Before we come into this manhaj of istidlal to answer the shubuhat, first of all, a few words when it comes to Kamilu Ziyarat. This book, Kamilu Ziyarat, is authored, the author of the book is Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway. Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway, in order for you to understand the weight of this author, number one, he was the teacher of Sheikh al-Mufid. Sheikh al-Mufid, who is the bastion and one of perhaps the greatest scholars, one of the greatest scholars in the ghaiba of the Imam, he studied his fiqh and he studied his usulul fiqh under Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway. Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway was the ustad of Sheikh Mufid, number one. Number two, Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway studied under who? Studied under Sheikh al-Kulayni, the author of Kitab al-Kafi. And you find that Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway was the equivalent of the marja taqleed of his time. In addition to the fact that Ibn Qawlaway lived during the time of Ghaybat al-Sughra, which means that some of his teachers or some of his teachers either studied directly under the Nawab, the four Naibs of the Imams. They either studied directly under Imam Hassan al-Askari, or his teachers were taught by students who were direct companions of Imam al-Hadi or Imam al-Askari. So you got to understand the weight of the scholar who is in question over here. Sheikh Ibn Qawlaway, number one. If you go back to all the books of Rijal, from Kitab Rijal al-Kishi and Rijal Sheikh al-Kishi or Sheikh al-Najashi, Sheikh al-Tusi, the authors of these books of Ilm al-Rijal that are remaining in this day and age, you will find that all of them have the highest level of praise for Ibn Qawlaway. He was the equivalent of the marja taqleed of his time. Ibn Qawlaway died in the year 350 or 360. 300 AH, either in the 50s or in the 60s, which means that he lived a big time of his life, a big part of his life inside of the Ghaybat al-Sughra of the Imam, where companions who have studied under the Ma'soom Imam were still alive and in the presence of the four Na'ibs. This has ahammiyah, has weight inside of it. This is Ibn Qawlaway. Number two, the text Kamilu Ziyarat. The textbook Kamilu Ziyarat is one of these texts that almost each and every Shia needs to have this in his house. There are certain books that are considered to be our masadir, primary sources. Shias of Ali Muhammad cannot do without these texts in their house. And alhamdulillah wa shukr, we live at a time where majority of these texts are translated into English. One of them is Kamilu Ziyarat. You look at, these are books that were not written in the 1970s, 50s, 60s, or 1800 or 1500. You open Kamilu Ziyarat, you find that it was authored during the time of Ghaybat al-Sughra. You are as close as possible that can be to the Imam when it comes to a time frame. Kamilu Ziyarat is an important text to have in the house. Tafsir al-Qummi is absolutely important to have in the house. Tafsir al-Qummi is where Sheikh al-Qummi authored a tafsir of the Quran and what is remaining from the tafsir of the Quran purely on the basis of the hadith of Ali Muhammad. Verses of the Quran. What does Imam Sadiq say about this verse of the Quran? What does Imam al-Baqir say about this verse of the Quran? This is an important book to have. Tafsir of Imam Hassan al-Askari. There are a number of our ulama, and including the ulama of the past, the likes of Sheikh Tusi and Sheikh Mufid, who relied on the tafsir of Imam Hassan al-Askari. This is an important tafsir to have. Tafsir that was narrated on authority of Imam al-Askari. So we have Kamilu Ziyarat, we have Tafsir al-Qummi, we have Tafsir Imam al-Askari. In addition to this, it is important that we have Kitab Sulaim. Kitab Sulaim bin Qais al-Hilali. You want to understand the reality of what happened after Saqifa, you find that this history is captured by Sulaim bin Qais al-Hilali. 4 books, and there are a number of books, but these are primary books that we need to have inside of our house, together with the Nahjul Balagha and Sahifa Sajjadiyah. Kamilu Ziyarat is a textbook which is a madrasa. This book, Kamilu Ziyarat, has been used over the passage of time by the grandest of ulama as a book through which the fiqh and the qawaid of ziyarat and azadari have been extracted. Kamilu Ziyarat is a book that through which you are able to understand from the hadith the fiqh, ahkam, adab of the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein and the ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt. Together from this, Kamilu Ziyarat is a book of Aqidah and Aqaid, a lot in which you are able to understand the true Aqaid from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt is found in Kamilu Ziyarat. Kamilu Ziyarat, you learn what happens and what the role and the responsibility of the Imams and the Malaika is in Alam al-Barzakh. In Kitab Kamilu Ziyarat, you understand the relationship between the Malaika and the Qabr of Imam al-Hussein. From the book Kamilu Ziyarat, you learn what was happening in the 7 heavens by the Arsh Yawmul Ashura. Conversations that happened between Allah and the Malaika. Over here, Imam al-Hussein is in jung, is in war on the day of Ashura between the ranks of the kuffar, and there in the heavens there is a conversation happening between Allah and the Malaika. These haqa'iq, these realities have all been put forward to us in a text like Kamilu Ziyarat. For you find that this was a book, is a book of istidlal. It was actually used by ulama such as Alama Majlisi, Hurrul Amili, the author of Wasa'il al-Shia. And even in this day and age, we have Maraja inside of Najaf al-Ashraf from Kamilu Ziyarat. This textbook Kamilu Ziyarat, the last that I know of, they have extracted a 3-volume text, 3-volume encyclopedia on the adab and the ahkam of Ziyarat and Azadari. 3 volumes. And this, even the Marja himself says, what I have got, I have just scratched on the surface. We have not gone deeper. You find shay'un ajib wa gharib. When you have people who come and sit on the minbar, or people who make claims from within our schools of thought and discredit the books such as Kamilu Ziyarat. This is jahl. For Ibn Qawlaway, you understand his position. You understand the weight of the book Kamilu Ziyarat. When we are replying back to this ishkal, on the assumption, see, there are some things in life that need to be a qa'idah when it comes to deen. On the assumption that this hadith that we have narrated, on the assumption that this hadith is not authentic, it does not mean that if in a certain book you find one hadith that is unauthentic, that you discredit the entire book. This is not the manhaj of ilm. The book Kamilu Ziyarat has close to 800 hadith, 800 and maybe 40 hadith, 830, 840 give or take. 800 hadith in regards to the ziyarah of Ahlul, or the ziyarat and the institution of Imam al-Hussein. It does not make sense. It is jahl that if one hadith is fabricated, that you discount the entire book altogether. We have to have insaf in our academic approach towards the literature of Ali Muhammad. That if one hadith is fabricated, then I have to go every hadith, I have to judge each and every hadith based on its merit. We have to have insaf. You cannot discount an entire book based on one hadith being unauthentic. This is on the assumption, if we do tanazul, that this hadith is not authentic. And that actually we will prove that this is the highest level of i'tibar. Tayyib. So if we understand this ishkal, we come now to the manhaj, methodology of how to reply back to shubuhat like these. The main shubha is this: how can Allah do the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? The words that have been used by the Imam, the exact words that are being used by the Imam is Wallahu yazuruhu fi kulli laylati jumu'ah. Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein every Thursday night, every Shabbat Jumu'ah. Tayyib. When we want to understand whether a hadith is authentic or not authentic, our entire kalam is on the content, on the matan of the hadith. Content, yani the matan. So first of all, we need to lay down some ground rules. There needs to be certain foundations. We establish them as clear-cut rules, and based on this foundation, we now have our building. One of the established rules, baselines, qaida that we must establish is that within our madhab, the madhab of Ali Muhammad, it is established by each and every one of the imams without a shadow of a doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a jism. We have hadith that are in plenty inside Kitab al-Kafi, inside Bihar al-Anwar, inside Kitab al-Tawheed of Sheikh al-Saduq. Hadith upon hadith that establish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have a jism. And because this is something that is well known in our school, I will not spend time explaining the hadith, because this is something that is well known. And the akal is also able to give us this deduction, because if Allah was to be a jism or a body, body means what? If a person has a body, or if a deity, if Allah had a body, that means the body is restricted to time and is restricted to space. A body cannot be in one place, in more than one place at any given point in time. And if a body cannot be in more than one place at any given point in time, that means this body is restricted. If a body is restricted and your God is restricted, then he can't be your God anymore, because he has limitations. And we believe that Allah is above any sort of limitations. This is one. Another akli burhan, or another akli proof, is that Allah cannot have a jism, because if you have a body is made up of body parts, and every organ or every limb is dependent on another limb in order for this jism or this body to remain functional. Just like our body, in order for us to be functional, we are dependent upon our legs. our legs, we're dependent on our hands, and all our body movements, we're dependent on our heart, and we're dependent on our mind, and we're dependent on this entire blood flow, circulation, and organs, which means that we are dependent on our health. Sahih Lola. So we are of the belief and we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ghani. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is independent. He is not in need of anything. Allah is not muhtaj as the deity. If he had a body, he would become muhtaj. And if he is muhtaj, he's not deserving to be worshipped. He doesn't qualify to be a creator if he himself is in need. Sahih Lola. So we have burhan from the aql, and we have text from the A'imma and Ahlul Bayt that show that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be a jism. So this is something as a qa'idah. It is established within our deen, within our teachings. Allah does not have a body. Sahih. Conclusion number 1. Based on this foundation, we now build. If we have established this, see, in Arabic language, any given word, lafz, any given word, can either have a meaning that is hakiki, literal, or can have a meaning that is majazi, which is metaphorical. So any word in Arabic language, the meaning, and this is not something that is restricted to Arabic, this is also in the English language and perhaps even in the Urdu language, that you have certain words where the intended meaning is not the literal meaning. The intended meaning is the majazi meaning. So I'll give you an example. When we say Amirul Mu'mineen, for example, is Asadullah. The word Asad over here, the lion of Allah, when we say that Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, is the lion of Allah. What is meant by the word lion? This word, this lafz, Asad, lion, meaning what? We didn't mean, wal-ayadu billah, the lion as in the carnivore animal that lives inside of the jungle. Law, the meaning over here is that it is a reference to the metaphorical meaning of the word lion, in that the lion is a word that is used to represent courage, strength, fearlessness. Hence, when we say that Ali, for example, or Amirul Mu'mineen is Asadullah, or Hamza was Asadur Rasul, the usage of the word lion is in its metaphorical meaning, that it represents courage and strength. So, rule number 1 is that in Arabic language, whenever you are studying hadith, a word, a lafz, is either hakiki or majazi. Now, when Imam Sadiq in this hadith says that Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, when you say that Allah does the ziyarah, it means what? Allah yazuruhu. Allah does the ziyarah. The meaning that comes to the mind is what? Allah doing the ziyarah, meaning that there is a movement from one place to another. You have to travel a distance from one place to another in order to visit. So, if I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have a jism, and I also know that in Arabic language a word can either be hakiki or majazi, I 100% definitely come to the conclusion that in this hadith of Imam al-Sadiq, when he says Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, 100% the intended meaning cannot be hakiki, because Allah doesn't have a jism. I know that Allah physically doesn't come from the arsh as a body and then come to Karbala and perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. 100% it cannot be this. And 100% this cannot be the intended meaning of Imam al-Sadiq. Because in other books we have other narrations where Imam al-Sadiq actually proves and fights with the people and shows them that Allah cannot have a jism. So now I come to the third step. I understand from here when Imam al-Sadiq says that Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, the meaning is majazi. It is metaphorical. Now I need to come back to the Quran. This is now the fourth step. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah told us what? Inni tarikun fikum al-thiqlain. Kitabullahi wa itrati ahla bayti. Ma in tamassaktum bihima lan tadillu ba'di abada. I leave behind for you the Quran and the Hadith. So long as you return back to both of them, you shall never go astray. Shias or people who claim to be Shias who reject this sort of hadith, number one, they didn't understand the difference between majazi and hakiki. And number two, they try to authenticate hadith of Ali Muhammad without going back to the Quran. This is a second major, it's an academic disaster for somebody to do this. We go back to the Quran. Now that I have a general understanding, we have put down a hypothesis. This is theory. So far we have created theory that it seems most likely over here that the word that is used is majazi. But now I want to go back to the Quran and I want to see within the Quran itself, is there any verse of the Quran that shows or alludes towards movement from A to B? These are the words that I'm using. Alludes towards distance or movement from A to B that is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that could also be majazi. So the idea is that I want to see the metaphorical meaning that I want to deduce from the hadith. Is it matched or backed by the Quran? Because everything has to have dalil. Sahih or la? So I come to Surah Al-Fajr. Surah Al-Fajr verse number 22. By the way, in between brackets, I hope Majlis is not boring or too technical. But Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Inshallah, even if it is little bit technical, if you have tahammul tonight, inshallah. I believe matami has to be an alim as well. And then alim also has to be a matami. You can't distinguish between the both. Tayyib, if you come to Surah Al-Fajr, shufu between brackets, before I go back to the main point. Bain al-Qawsayn, Surah Al-Fajr is the surah of Imam al-Hussein. In fact, we have hadith al-Sharif that is narrated by Maulana Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, where Imam al-Sadiq says, Dawimu, continuously keep reciting Surah Al-Fajr. For the one who recites Surah Al-Fajr will be raised with the companions of Imam al-Hussein on the day of judgment. To the extent that Imam al-Sadiq says, recite Surah Al-Fajr in your wajib salat and in your nafila salat. Shay'un ajib. And this is not because, Baba, I should not say who, I say about myself. I cannot imagine in a million years that Allah can raise a sinner like me to be in the same line with somebody like Habib ibn Madahir or Joan or Abbas. Who am I and who are they? I don't make the dust under the feet of Joan. But the Imam and the Mawla is Kareem ibnul Kareem. The Imam is the madhar of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yesterday we were talking with the brothers on the rahmah of Allah. Who am I to deserve? But the Imam is Kareem. Dawimu, he says, continuously keep reciting Surah Al-Fajr. For indeed, if you continue and you have this practice of reciting Surah Al-Fajr, you are raised with the companions of Imam al-Hussein. Inside of Surah Al-Fajr, verse number 22, we have an ayah of the Quran that says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So the verse is accurate. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. Ajib. The Quran is speaking about Yawmul Qiyamah. On Yawmul Qiyamah, the Quran is saying, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. On the day of judgment, Allah will come with the malaika standing in lines. Saffan Saffa. Now what does this mean in the Quran? The Quran is saying, Allah himself is saying, Allah will come with the malaika. Ja'a is a verb, means he came, he moved, covered a distance from A to B. Ja'a. In the hadith of Imam as-Sadiq, it alludes towards the same thing. Yazuruhullah. Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. Meaning what? It alludes to covering a distance. Correct? Ja'a rabbuka wal malaikatu saffan saffa. What does that mean? Now I begin to understand. Again, I have to go back to my first qa'idah that we built. The qa'idah is that Allah does not have a jism. So when I come back to this verse of the Holy Quran and I read وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ, I understand it doesn't mean Allah will physically come on the mahshar yawmul qiyamah. There is a meaning that is majazi. Similarly, I dig a little bit deeper in the Quran. Is there any other verse in the Quran that points towards this? You come to Suratul Qiyamah. You find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Suratul Qiyamah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Wujuhun yawma idhin nadira ila rabbiha nadira. On the day of judgment, it's describing the state of the people who are going to enter into Jannah. If you are with me, we are now seeing words that are metaphorically used in the Quran that denotes movement to Allah. Look at this verse. Wujuhun yawma idhin nadira ila rabbiha nadira. Those faces on the day of judgment, it's talking about the believers, those faces that are filled with nur, and they are looking at their Lord. Ila rabbiha nadira. They are looking at their Lord. Now, you have two verses of the Quran. One verse of the Quran, it alludes to the fact, if you take it on the hakiki basis, that Allah will come down to the mahshar with the malaika in lines. And you have another verse of the Quran that says, on the day of judgment, the believers will look at Allah. Now, how do I know that Allah doesn't have a jism? But I need to, so I understand that in the Quran, there are certain verses that may reflect that you can see Allah, or that Allah has moved a distance or has traveled, but it is the usage of these words are metaphorical. So if I can attribute metaphorical words to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, then I can also have metaphorical words attributed to Allah in the hadith. So now I come and I say to this jahil person, you cannot reject this hadith saying that, oh, we have ghulu because we have attributed a body to Allah, because the same metaphorical dhawq, the same metaphorical taste, the same metaphorical style of talking in the Quran matches the metaphorical style in the hadith. I don't know if you caught on to this. The style of talking in the hadith matches the style of the language used in the Quran. This is a Quran Samit and that is a Quran Natik. You can't separate Ahlul Bayt from Quran. Their mizaj is one, their dhawq is one, the masdar is one. Ya Ali. Tayyib. Till here, everything that we have done, we have established the fact that, number one, this hadith of Imam as-Sadiq in Kamil al-Ziyarat cannot be taken as literal. It has to be interpreted as metaphorical. And then number two, we backed up this claim by seeing two verses in the Quran where the words that are attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are also metaphorical. Now we move to the next step, because you are building on your house. Now that we understand it's metaphorical, Baba, what does these metaphorical words mean? What is the meaning of this metaphor that is used inside of the Quran? Again, you need to come back to Ahlul Bayt, and you will find that those people who did tafsir of the Quran without Ahlul Bayt, qasaman on the member of Imam al-Hussein, ila jahannam wa bi'as al-masir. You have people from the Amma, ulama of the Amma, the Mukhalifin. When they come and انتم شوفوا, go back to the tafasir of the Mukhalifin in this verse of the Quran, Surah Al-Qiyamah, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَادِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. That the people whose faces are shining, yani the believers, they will be looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. They are mufassirin from the Mukhalifin. They say, yes, on the day of judgment, you can see Allah. Ajib. They said, how? They said, no. In the dunya you can't see him, but in the akhirah you can see him. You know, if you refer back to Bukhari, you refer back to Muslim, hadith ajib wa gharib. They have that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a leg, and he will put this leg into Jahannam yawmul qiyamah, and he will ask Jahannam, is it enough or you want more? And Jahannam will say, la, enough. All these things are over there. This is a problem when you start doing tafsir of the Quran and you don't go back to Ahlul Bayt. When you abandon Ahlul Bayt, you don't have any option. Again, we come back to this base hadith. Rasulullah said, Quran and Itra, Quran and Ahlul Bayt. My concern over here is that if there is the metaphorical usage of a word in the Quran, I need to come back to the Ahlul Bayt, and I ask Ahlul Bayt, because this Quran was nazil on you, and because you are the mufassirin of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَحْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask the people of dhikr if you don't know. Refer back, even the Mukhalifin, Al-Qundusi, Al-Hanafi, in his tafsir, Shawahid al-Tanzil says, Ahl al-Dhikr is Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Imams from the lineage of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ya Ali. Now I come back and I have to see, what does Amirul Mu'mineen and the divinely appointed Imams of Amirul Mu'mineen say in the Quran about this verse? Maulana Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma sholli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This hadith is found in Kitab al-Tawheed of Sheikh al-Saduq, Imam al-Ridha. Imam al-Ridha was asked in regards to Surah al-Fajr, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. They said, Ya Abul Hasan, what is the meaning of this verse? Because people say that Allah will come down with the malaika yawmul qiyamah. Imam Rida says, it doesn't mean the metaphoric, the usage of the word waja'a rabbuka over here doesn't mean your Lord is going to come with the malaika. It means ja'a rabbuka. Imam Rida says, ya'ani ja'a amru rabbika. The amr of Allah will be manifested when the malaika line up saffan saffa on the day of judgment in the mahshar. The amr of Allah will manifest itself. But because this amr belongs to Allah, Allah said, Ja'a rabbuka. But it is the amr of Allah. It is not that the Lord is a body and he came down. I cannot, if the minute you separate Quran from Ahlul Bayt, we're doomed. This is one. So now I understand these metaphorical usages of the words, they actually have meanings inside of them. And now that you understand the meaning, the verse of the Quran becomes absolutely clear. Same thing, you come to Surah Al-Qiyamah. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَادِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. The faces of the believers on the day of judgment that will be shining with light. إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. They will be looking at their Lord. They will be looking at Allah. Again, they came to Imam al-Ridha. Again, Hadith al-Sharif is in Kitab al-Tawheed of Sheikh al-Saduq. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, how is it that is it possible that people will look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they can see Allah in the akhirah? Imam al-Ridha says to them, Baba, the meaning over here is not that, Imam, by the way, Imam didn't say Baba, this is just from my side in case. It doesn't mean over here that the people are going to see Allah on the day of judgment. What is meant over here, that the faces that are shining of the believers will be looking at, يعني ينظرون إلى ثواب من ربهم. They will be looking at the thawab and their place in paradise that is granted to them by Allah. Because it is granted by Allah, it is attributed to Allah. Where is our tafsir? Where is the tafsir of the mukhalifin? Tayyib. Now that I have been able, or now that we have been able to establish from the Quran that there are certain words that are used and their meanings are metaphorical, we understood that these two verses of the Quran, if you take them at its surface level, somebody out of their ignorance could say this means Allah has a body. Because in the Quran you said, Ja'a Rabbuka. You know, this is what the Mukhalifin did. There is a school of thought from the Mukhalifin that are the Mujassima. They said, no, Allah has a body, and they use the Quran to prove that Allah has a body. And they use, bidhabt, they use these two verses. Imam Rida comes and he says, no, it means something else. So now, us as Shias of Ali Muhammad, we know that these verses at their surface level, even though they might allude to the fact that Allah has a body, or that Allah travels, or that Allah can be seen. When we come back to Hadith of Ahlul Bayt, we understand, no, these are things that are metaphorical, and the meaning is actually something much more deeper and something much more logical. Now, if that is established in the Quran, I need to come back to my hadith over here. And I say, just like the way words are used metaphorically inside of the Quran, even when it comes to the hadith, these words of Imam as-Sadiq over here allude to the fact that when Imam as-Sadiq says Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, it has to have a meaning that is metaphorical. What is the metaphorical meaning of this? There are two interpretations, and each one shows you the azamah of the ziyarah and the azamah of the qabr of Imam al-Hussein. What does it mean when Imam al-Sadiq says Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? It means that the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its entirety descends on the qabr of Imam al-Hussein and on the land of Karbala. Every Thursday night, when you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the misdaq, the madhar of this rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in its grandeur, this rahmah in its majesty, this rahmah in its intensity descends upon Karbala every Thursday night. This is the tafsir of this hadith that is given to us by ulama, the likes of Alama Majlisi, Rahmatullah alayhin Biharul Anwar, and Sheikh Amilin Wasa'il al-Shi'a. Person will come and say, what is the proof that the ziyarah of Allah is the rahmah? We are able to understand this if we collect a number of hadith. Again, come back to Kamilu Ziyarat. A number of hadith that talk about Karbala and the grave of Imam al-Hussein being the source of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that there is no other place on earth in which this type of mercy, in this grand scale, with this intensity, can come together in one place. I will read through you only 10 because our time is finished. The types of mercy that come on the qabr of Imam al-Hussein. Number one, the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. When you get to the qabr of Imam al-Hussein, it says over here, the zair of Imam al-Hussein enters into Jannah thousands of years before the rest of the people on the mahshar. This is rahmah or no? Rahmah or no? Rahmah. Number two, the person who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, he will be raised from the mahshar. He will be raised in the mahshar yawmul qiyamah with a nur on his face. The other people will become blinded from his nur. This nur is rahmah or no? Rahmah. Number three, تحصيل الشفاعة. Allah's or Rasulullah or the Imams in the hadith mentions that the Zair of Imam al-Hussein, the one who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, qualifies for shafa'ah on the day of judgment. Shafa'ah is rahmah and mercy of Allah or no? Is mercy. More than that, Rasulullah says, or the Ahlul Bayt say, the one who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein in Yawmul Qiyamah, not only will he gain shafa'ah, Baba, he will do shafa'ah for other people. This is the rahmah and the mercy of Allah or no? This is mercy of Allah. But the hadith goes on to say, غفران الذنوب. Hadith that are mutawatir, the person who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein there are hadith that say that as you reach Karbala, the minute you reach Karbala, the first smell of breath of the air of Karbala and your sins are forgiven. This ghufran al-dhunub is rahmah or not rahmah? Rahmah ilahiyah. But hadith al-Sharif says the zair of Imam al-Hussein, his du'as are mustajab. Du'as to be mustajab is the rahmah of Allah or not the rahmah? It's the rahmah of Allah. But Hadith al-Sharif says a person who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, Hadith says Imam al-Sadiq, there is not a single person who has a hum or a gham in his heart except that if he visits Imam al-Hussein, this hum and gham is taken from his heart. This is rahmah or not rahmah? It's rahmah. This is rahmah. Imam al-Hussein said, I am the one who is mahmoom and maghmoom. I was killed while I was mahmoom and maghmoom. I will make sure that my zuwar, when they are here, they are never mahmoom or maghmoom. This is rahmah of Allah, rahmah. But he goes on to say, the one who performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. Hadith al-Sharif says, in Jannah has darajat. According to some hadith, over 6,000 darajat we have in Jannah. Hadith al-Sharif by Imam al-Sadiq says, every verse of the Quran you memorize, on the day of judgment you will be told, Iqra, irfa, or Iqra, idfa. Every verse of Quran that you recite, that you have memorized, you will be raised one level in Jannah. One level in Jannah. If you have memorized the 100 verses, you will be on the 100th floor. If you have memorized 10, on the 10th floor, so on and so forth. Imam Imam tells us, and all these hadith you can vet and you can authenticate from Kamilu Ziyarat. You find that Ma'soom Imam says, Yawmul Qiyamah, or in Akhirah, when you enter into Jannah, none of us should be happy by just entering Jannah. For us, we don't want Jannah. Our Jannah is to be with Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein is the Jannah. Sahih Allah. Ma'soom Imams, and Ma'soom Imam knows that generation later, my Shia are not behind Jannah. They are in the company of Imam al-Hussein. They want to be with Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein is the real Jannah. Ma'soom Imam tells you, in Jannah, if you want your maskan, if you want your residence to be in proximity with Imam al-Hussein, perform the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. For this ziyarah that allows you to get a residency permit next to Imam al-Hussein in Jannah is rahmah or no? Rahmah. But Hadith al-Sharif says, if you want an increment in your rizq, perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. An increment in rizq is rahmah or no? Rahmah. Allahu Akbar. If we go through the whole list. From here we understand when Imam as-Sadiq Ruhi Lahul Fida says that Allah does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein Laylatul Jumu'ah, it means that the rahmah and the mercy of Allah in all its vastness, in all its grandeur, in all its greatness is concentrated in Karbala. And if you want a part of this mercy, visit Imam al-Hussein. That's why hadith says every Laylatul Jum'ah, every Thursday go and visit Imam al-Hussein. I tell you a secret, Bain al-Qawsain, from the Daydana, you look in the lives of every one of the great Marja Taqlid. Any great Marja Taqlid, he never reached the maqam of Marja Taqlid without the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. Go read. the seerah of all the ulama of the past, if they lived inside of Najaf, Thursday night, without fail, they went to perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. Come rain, come shine. Ahna who were living away from Karbala, Thursday night we recite Ziyarat Waritha or Ziyarat Ashura. This didn't come from nowhere, Shabab. This comes in from hadith that are deep-rooted like this. And if you understand this hadith has this level of depth, has this level of ma'rifah, has this level of tawheed, how ignorant and how painful it is that our Shia reject hadith like this, discredit hadith like this, because they didn't understand Allah performs the ziyarah. But if you didn't understand, ask. If you didn't understand, study. Hawza ilmiya is important for a person to understand the deen and the principles of the deen. It's not, Imam al-Hussein is not about opinions. Imam al-Hussein is a red line. Be very careful. We said this even in the Majlis with other people before. Be very careful. My Urdu is not that good, but it's the way they say. Sab ke saath panga lena. Imam Hussein ke saath panga mat lena. Never. Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. Your dunya will get ruined. Your akhirah will get ruined. Your nasl will get ruined. Everything of yours will get ruined. So if you don't accept something about Imam al-Hussein, you didn't accept the fada'il, you didn't like something about Azadari, you didn't like something, keep your opinion to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Don't create fitna. First interpretation is what? Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, يعني madhar of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aynu tawheed. Number two, if we already understand that that Allah doesn't have a body and Allah does not move from makan to makan, look at the hadith and you will understand now what is the position of the Anbiya and the Awsiya and the Malaika. Hadith Sharif says, Safwan is asking Imam al-Sadiq, do you do the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? Should we do the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? What does Imam al-Sadiq say? وَكَيْفَ لَا أَزُورُهُ? How do you expect me, Ja'far ibn Muhammad, Imam, to not perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? Why, ya Aba Abdullah? He goes on to say, وَاللَّهُ يَزُورُهُ فِي كُلِّ لَيْلَةِ جُمُعَةٍ. Allah performs the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein every Friday night, yani every Thursday night. What does the hadith say? يَحْبِتُ مَعَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ إِلَيْهِ. Number one, the Anbiya, the Malaika are descending down. Yahbit from Habata. Now I understand there is something physical happening over here. Because the Malaika are Jism. They are Jism from Nur. So I understand they are Malaika from the Arsh and from the seventh heavens and from, there are particular Malaika. Some of them are from the fourth heaven, some of them are from the seventh heaven, some of them are from the Arsh. This hadith over here is mutlaq. If we enter that chapter, we'll sit here till Fajr. But muhim, Malaika are coming down. So Jism, Nur, Malaika are coming down from the heavens. Where? Karbala. Who else is coming down with the Malaika? يَحْبِتُ مَعَ الْمَلَائِكَ إِلَيْهِ وَالْأَنْبِيَا. The Anbiya from Adam to Khatam. Yani Laylatul Jum'ah, Jumerat, in Karbala, Adam is in Karbala, Nuh is in Karbala, Musa is in Karbala, Isa is in Karbala, Yaqub is in Karbala, Yusuf is in Karbala, Allah. Mahrajan, there is a conference of the Anbiya happening in Karbala. At the grave of Imam al-Hussein. Wal-Awsiya. Every wasi of every Nabi is performing the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala. Wasi of every Nabi. Now, tabbik, we want tatbik of this kalam. Every Nabi had a wasi. Adam had awsiya. So we understand the awsiya of Nabi Adam, they are performing the ziyarah Thursday night. Nabi Nuh had awsiya. His awsiya are performing ziyarat Thursday night. Nabi Isa, Nabi Musa, all of them. Ashraful Anbiya Rasulullah also has awsiya. Who is the awsiya? Yani from Amirul Mu'mineen. Amirul Mu'mineen to Imam al-Hadi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Every Thursday night, our Imams, Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam al-Mujtaba, Imam Sajjad, Imam Bakir, Imam Sadiq, Imam Kadhim, Imam Rida, Imam Jawad, Imam Rida, Imam Jawad, Imam Hadi, Imam al-Askari. Our Imams are in Karbala on Thursday night. When a person goes to Karbala with this Aqidah and this Ma'rifah, your ziyarat sarahatan changes. So the mercy of Allah is descending in Karbala. The Malaika are descending down. The Anbiya are descending down, and the Awsiya are descending down. We are on the second interpretation. Why does Imam Sadiq tell us that the Malaika, the Anbiya, and the Awsiya are descending down to Karbala with the mercy of Allah? Meaning what? With the mercy of Allah, the Anbiya and the Awsiya are the representatives and the delegation of Allah to Imam al-Hussein in Karbala. The Malaika do not visit Karbala with their own merit as the Malaika. They come with an added title, and that is they are the delegation of Allah to Karbala. The Nabi is not coming to Karbala because he's a Nabi from the Anbiya of Allah. He is visiting Imam al-Hussein with a special badge, with a special pass, and that pass is from the delegation of Allah. This is Ma'rifah. The martaba and the daraja of the Anbiya. Allahu Akbar, Karbala. Allahu Akbar, Imam al-Hussein. Ainul Ma'rifah, the core of Ma'rifah, is in Karbala, is with the ilm of our Ahlul Bayt. And if you notice, this is my last, and start the Masa'ib from here. Number one, I'll conclude and summarize very quickly. Shabab Matamis. Number one, sitting on the mimbar is a responsibility. This mimbar is not a place to attack the institution of Imam al-Hussein. It's there to promote and strengthen the institution of Imam al-Hussein. Number two, this something practical for us. Just because we didn't understand the hadith from its surface level doesn't mean that the hadith is fake. Doesn't mean that the hadith is fabricated. Hadith can have deeper meanings, and the Majlis for tonight is an example of this. Number three, you notice this entire Majlis, we never touched upon the sanad or the chain of narrators. Aslan, the sanad and the chain of narrators has nothing to do with the authenticity or authenticating hadith such as these. Hadith of ma'arif, hadith of aqa'id are to be weighed against the Quran and the other hadith of Ahlul Bayt that are established. Don't let anybody come and cheat you. Intum, don't fall into the trap that somebody takes you away from the true Aqidah or hadith that point towards the true Aqidah by using the chain of narrators and the sanad. This is ignorance. Again, it's another academic disaster. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us the opportunity to perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein. I know I've crossed my time. Tomorrow's Majlis I will discount by 10 minutes. Inshallah, we will end early. But may Allah grant all of us, inshallah, the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein in the dunya, shafa'ah of Imam al-Hussein in the akhirah, and inshallah, our real green cards in Jannah. The same with Imam al-Hussein, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Masa'ib of Imam al-Hussein, Ahibai. from all the tragedies, that the women of Ali Muhammad faced. From Karbala to Kufa and from Kufa to Sham, the tragedies that the women faced on the 11th of Muharram, Allahu Akbar. Do you know one of the most difficult things is when the women of Ali Muhammad, when the children and the women of Ali Muhammad had to leave Karbala to go as Kufa. The narrations mention, the Maqtal mentions on the 11th of Muharram, the women, Sayyida Zainab, Sayyida Kulthum, Sayyida Sukaina, they are all tied with ropes and chains, and they are made to pass through the Maidan. The Maqtal says that when Sayyida Sukaina saw the body of her father, Imam al-Husayn, she threw herself onto the Maidan. She threw herself on the body of Aba Abdullah. Allah. How is the body of Imam al-Husayn on the 11th of Muharram? This is the body of the Ma'soom Imam without a head. Allah! This is the body of Imam al-Husayn whose bones have been broken because the horses have trampled upon it 3 times. The Maqtal mentions Sayyida Sukaina, when she saw the broken body of her father, she threw herself from the camel. She threw herself on the chest of Imam al-Husayn and she began weeping and weeping until she fainted. Allah. She fainted. Sayyida Sukaina says that when I was on the chest of my father, I heard a voice come out from the manhar. Allah. Ya Shi'at Ali Muhammad, do you know what is the manhar? The manhar is that part of the neck from which the head was severed from the rest of the body. It is the part of the body where the neck was separated from the head was separated from the rest of the body. Sayyida Sukaina says, I heard a voice come out from the manhar and it said, Ya Sukaina, ballighi shi'ati salami. He said, Oh Sakina, give my salams to my Shia. Allah, Allah. Ya Aba Abdullah, we receive your salams. Wa alayka salam. Wa alayka salam. Imam al-Husayn over here. Imam al-Husayn over here. Matamiz. Imam al-Husayn has a message for you. He's given a message on the 11th of Muharram through Sayyida Sukaina. Imam al-Husayn says to Sayyida Sukaina, Ballighi shi'ati salami. Give my salams to my Shia and say to them, Mahma sharibtum udba ma'in fadhkuruni. It says, oh Shi'as, whenever you drink water, remember me and remember my thirst. Allah. What else? Imam al-Husayn says to Sukaina, أو سمعتم عن غريب أو شهيد فندبوني. If you ever hear in your life that there is a gharib, if you ever hear there is a shaheed, then tell them to remember me in Karbala. Allah, Allah. Shi'at Ali Muhammad, this is a nasiha from Imam al-Husayn to you. What does he say? He says to Sayyida Sukaina, tell my Shi'as, أَنَا سِبْتُ الَّذِي بِغَيْرِ جُرْمٍ قَتَلُونِي. Tell my Shia, I am that grandson of Rasulullah. The enemies killed him without any sin. I had no sin and they killed me. But Imam al-Husayn says, Sukaina, tell my Shi'as, وَبَعْدَ, after they killed me, بجرد الخيل بعد القتل عمدا سحقوني. Tell my Shias that after I was killed, they broke the bones of my chest and my body by trampling upon me with the horses. Allah, Allah. Nasihat of Imam al-Husayn. This is Imam al-Husayn's advice and his message to the Shia. This is the last part of the Masa'ib. If you have the heart to listen, Shias of Ali Muhammad, Imam al-Husayn is saying to Sukaina, say to my Shia Sukaina, say to my Shias, I wish you were there on the day of Ashura. Imam al-Husayn is saying, Intum Shi'as, I wish you were there on the day of Ashura. I say, why ya Aba Abdullah? He says, I wish you were there on the day of Ashura. جميعا تنظروني, all of you, I wish you were there looking at me. كيف أستسقي لطفلي, I wish you were there to see how I was asking for water for my infant Ali Asghar. فأبوا أن يرحموني. Ya Shia Ala Muhammad, the wish of Imam al-Hussein is that I wish my Shias were there to see how Ali Asghar was made shaheed and they shot him with an arrow without any mercy. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam Hussein.
जब याद सकीना को तेरी आती है बाबा, जब याद सकीना को तेरी आती है बाबा, जब याद सकीना को तेरी आती है बाबा, सरजिंदा की दीवारों से, सरजिंदा की दीवारों से टकराती है बाबा, जब याद सकीना को तेरी आती है बाबा। दरबार यजीदी में भला कैसे मैं जाऊं, दरबार यजीदी में भला कैसे मैं जाऊं, है चाक गिरेबां, है चाक गिरेबां ने हया